Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Bases Express Show. I am your host, Austin Spiro. Thank you so much for joining us for a special episode of the Total Bases podcast. We are unveiling the greatest of all time. We are starting our greatest of all time series. Tonight, we are starting with the greatest first baseman of all time as voted on by the Baseball Life Facebook group. And joining me, making this a regular thing now, is Kevin Miller. Kevin, good to see you.
Hey, it's good to be on, man. Looking forward to talking about the best first baseman ever, maybe raising a few grievances as we get close to this Festivus season. I'll make sure I make all my grievances known.
Yeah, for sure. There's going to be a lot of debate in the chat and maybe among us as well. Speaking of first baseman, the crime dog, Fred McGriff, making the Hall of Fame finally, thanks to the contemporary committee, the only one, and unanimously making the Hall of Fame. As a Braves fan, I'm sure you're pretty excited for the crime dog making the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, for sure. And, he was part of the championship team in 95. And there's a chance he'll decide to wear a Braves hat on his plaque. And I know there have been a few guys who have gone with no logo. Yeah. But he's got three teams I could see doing it, and I obviously want him to go in as a Brave because I'm a Braves fan. But I'm just glad he's in. Yeah, 493 home runs. He belongs. He belongs, and it's the same amount of home runs as Lou Gehrig, who we'll definitely be talking about later today.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think Crime Dog really deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. I've been saying that for a long time. I could see him going in as either a Ray because he's from Tampa or a Brave because he won the World Series with Atlanta. So I see either Tampa or Atlanta. Those are the two for me. Other news, we just got it breaking that Mitch Haniger is going to the Giants. A lot of signing today. Still waiting on Aaron Judge. Seems like it's down to the Yankees and the Giants. Corey Richmond is in the chat. And Corey is reporting that Pittsburgh has won the lottery again and has the first pick of the draft. No surprise to me. I thought Pittsburgh was probably going to get it. And I think the other big news is I can't pronounce his name. Baerga. Can't remember. Baerga, the journalist. He's reporting that the Giants are also in on Carlos Correa. We were just talking off camera there that the Giants being in on all these high priced guys, they're going to run out of money soon. They're going to start looking like the Angels, like the Rangers now buying DeGrom and paying all these big contracts. They're going to run out of money.
Yeah. So Baerga, I don't even know if he really does any true reporting. He's a former player, played for the Indians in the 90s. He's a good player. I think he's got 2,000 hits or just maybe he's just under 2,000 hits. He's a pretty good player. But somehow he is in the know on some guys because he broke somebody's signing news last year, way before Passan and Rosenthal and all those guys. And he claims he knows something about Correa too. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I don't know. We'll see. We've already got the Rangers buying in on Jacob DeGrom and getting all these big contracts, and it seems like the Giants are getting pretty aggressive too. The Dodgers can't seem to land anybody, and either the Yankees. So this will be maybe a changing of the guard here. It'll be really interesting. Nonetheless, we are going to get started on our greatest first baseman of all time. So the way that this worked was I've been wanting to do this for a while. And it only took me having a podcast to be able to get this done. So we put out there, Kevin's our main poll guy. He's starting a new series, the going around the diamond of who would you count on to have no errors. I thought that's a good poll. I like that. So, in conjunction with Kevin, we're starting the greatest of all time series. So I put out every once in a while, every 2-3 days, I put out a new one, and everybody gave me their top 10 lists of greatest players of all time at each position. So we have first, second, short, and third. We have catcher. We have top 15 outfield. And then we have top 10 starting pitching and top 10 relief pitching. And then I put it all, every ballot into a database and, or, my spreadsheet. And I did it, I did it by hand, and we calculated the points, and then we went from there. It was really interesting. A lot of the ballots. So, we'll get right into it. Before we get into it, a lot of first basemen got voted on or got mentioned in these ballots. I'm trying to pull it up really quick and see if I can find it. I can't find it right now. Oh, there it is. Is that it? Yeah, that's it right there. Let's see. A total of 63 first basemen were mentioned in these ballots by the Baseball Life Facebook group. So with a lot of mentions, a lot of participation, I really appreciate it, but only 10 could make the list. So without further ado, let's get started on the list here. Let me share my screen. Come on, share the screen. There's that. And then we have to, there, we good? You got it? Okay, cool. All right. So, let's get started on the greatest first baseman of all time. The first thing is the players that just missed the top 10. As you can see, I had my little Bob Uecker meme there. So these are the guys that just finished just outside the top 10, except for Stan Musial. Stan, the man we had to omit from the list due to extenuating circumstances, and I'll just kind of blow it. He made 2 lists. And the other position, the other list that he was on, he played more. So he played more at that position. So we took Stan Musial out of the first baseman list, and our caveat was they could only be on one list. But if we didn't have that, Stan Musial would have been on both lists. So in 12th was Jim Tomei, who was 1 point away from making the top 10. One point. Keith Hernandez finished 13th. Don Mattingly, missing out on the Hall of Fame and also missing out on our greatest top 10 of all time, is going to be 14th, and Mark McGwire 15th. Any surprises there, Kevin, on who just missed in the top 10?
Yeah, I think it's surprising, just looking at, Keith Hernandez and Don Mattingly being above McGwire, and then above some guys that, didn't even make top 15, like Johnny Mize, even Todd Helton, guys like that. It's a bit of a surprise. I think some of that's got to do with popularity, though, right?
Right.
Those are 2 really popular guys who are also, happen to play for Mattingly his whole career, and for Hernandez a good chunk of his career in New York.
Right.
And I think that plays a role in the popularity, and they each won an MVP and were good defensively. So they do have some unique aspects of their resume, but it's a little surprising to see him ahead of McGwire, which could just be, people not liking the steroids, which I get.
Right.
And a few other guys. It's a bit surprising.
Yeah. And we did not put anybody, we didn't put any restrictions on anybody's list. I just said, whoever you think is the top 10, go for it. And, people did research. I know, like, Corey Richmond is in the chat. He did research and compiled all of these lists, and we had people research based on statistics, based on the eye test, based on just who their favorites were. Right. And, these top 10 lists could have been made any different way. Like right now, Corey Richmond is in the chat saying defense matters. So maybe, Don Mattingly, Keith Hernandez being a little more defensively minded than, people like McGwire and Tomei. Maybe that's why I put them up a little bit. I don't know. I think the popularity is a little bit more of a factor here, but nonetheless, they didn't make the top 10, but they were very close. Let's move on. So we're going to get started with our number 10 first baseman of all time. Now, really, he was number 11. But with the omission of Stan Musial, he made the top 10. And honestly, I couldn't see a top 10 list without this guy. And nonetheless, let's unveil our number 10 first baseman of all time. Harmon Killebrew is our number 10 first baseman of all time. So Harmon Killebrew had a 22-year career with the Washington Senators, Minnesota Twins, and Kansas City Royals from 1954 to 1975. He is 78th all time in games played with 2,345. He has a career 256 average, 376 OBP, and a 509 slugging, tied for 90th all time. He's got a career 142 weighted runs created plus. He's got a career 66.1 WAR. He appeared in 11 All-Star games, was the 1969 AL MVP, and is 12th all time in homers with 573. Harmon Killebrew breaking our top 10 and starting us off. Kevin, what is your reaction to Harmon Killebrew being number 10? Should he be higher? Should he be lower? What do you think?
I'm pretty good with Killebrew being at 10. There's probably some people who got a little caught up in positions with Killebrew. He played just under half of his career as a third baseman, albeit a bad third baseman, which is why he got moved to first base. But I mean, the man was listed at 5'11", which means he's probably closer to 5'10", 5'9".
Right.
And he hit 573 home runs in an era where there were only about 10 guys who hit a lot of home runs at any given time.
Right.
And he's one of two guys. I learned this stat a while back. He's one of two guys, along with Henry Aaron, to hit 40 home runs in 3 different decades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he and Aaron both hit 40 home runs in a year in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Killebrew did it in 1970 was his last one. So he just made it. But I do want to give a quick shout out to Reggie Jackson, who somehow hit 40 home runs in the 60s and the 80s, but not the 70s in between. So there were almost 3 guys, but Killebrew and Hank Aaron did it. So I don't have a problem at all with Killebrew being where he is. Other than the big train, Walter Johnson, he's probably the greatest, twin or senator of all time. He's a stud.
Yeah, he was a stud for sure. Definitely, I think he's deserving of being in the top 10. I think 10th is probably as high as I would go for Killebrew. 573 home runs is a lot of home runs. That's a ton. And being 12th all time in home runs, the man could slug. He's in the top 100 of all time in terms of slugging percentage. He's almost there in the top 50 in weighted runs created plus. You can't argue the statistics. The dude was he was the man for a long time when it came to that Twins organization. Extremely durable, playing in almost 2,500 games. It's an incredible feat, nonetheless. And I think as we get farther into the list, we're going to start seeing that maybe the number of games played or the durability doesn't necessarily play into, whether they're the greatest of all time or not, because we got people on this list that only played like 1,300 games. So we'll get into that here pretty soon. But yeah, Harmon Killebrew breaking our list at number 10. Moving on to number 9 of all time. By the way, if whatever you think of this list, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll mention you. I'd love the discussion. It would be great. Corey Richmond's in there right now, spouting stuff off. Love it. Let's go to our number 9. Please give me the number 9 guy. What happened? There he is. Our number 9 guy, Jeff Bagwell. We talked about him a little bit in the last Total Bases podcast, or Felipe talked about him, I should say, with the suspicion of steroids. But nonetheless, Jeff Bagwell is number 9 all time, according to our Baseball Life Facebook group. He had a 15-year career with just the Astros from 1991 to 2005. He played less games than Killebrew, 2,150. He had a career 297 average, 408 OBP, and a 540 slugging. Career 149 weighted runs created plus, 80.2 career WAR, which is tied for 37th of all time with Pete Rose, who got votes on this ballot, but wasn't even close. In fact, I think he was last place of all the people that got mentioned in a ballot. He appeared in 4 All-Star games, was the 1991 Rookie of the Year, 1994 NL MVP, and Gold Glove in 1994, and he won the Silver Slugger 3 times. So Houston Astros man, Jeff Bagwell. What do you think, Kevin? Jeff Bagwell, number 9. What do you think?
So Bagwell gets tricky, right? You've got to decide how you feel about the Andro use, right? It was it was legal when he started using it, and depending on who you ask, he might have stopped when it became illegal or continued. We don't necessarily know. And it wasn't considered an anabolic steroid until after he had retired. That's a more recent development. So you got to decide how you feel about that. It's the same thing that Mark McGuire took, and a few others. So you got to figure that out. But in terms of just on-field production, especially at the plate, I don't have an issue with Bagwell at 9. He had a stretch, probably I guess from 93 to 2000 or so, where you can make an argument he was a top 2 or 3 first baseman in baseball during an absolutely loaded era,
Right.
for first basemen and power hitters in general.
I mean, we're talking about the 90s.
It's really good.
We're talking about the 90s here. That's the era of these monsters that, were hitting, the Mark McGuire's, the Sammy Sosa's, these guys were monsters, and Bagwell was right there with them.
Yeah, that I do think that his 1994 Gold Glove is probably a little bit of a joke.
Yeah.
I don't think of Jeff Bagwell when I think of elite first base defense, but with the Batman, he was really daggone good. I mean, when you have a career 149 WRC plus, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There are only 30 guys in the history of the sport whose offensive production is better than Bagwell's if you go by WRC plus's metric.
Right. Yeah, it's just, I mean, and a lot of these metrics, I mean, OBP, slugging percentage, weighted runs created plus, WAR, he's in the top 50. In fact, he's pretty much in the top 40 all time. Think of how many players in there are in baseball history, and this man is ranked in the top 50 in a number of these categories. It's pretty insane when you think about it. When it comes to offense, the only thing that I have to say about Jeff Bagwell, he has one of my favorite batting stances of all time. that low crouch and getting all of that power out of that low crouch. It was just, I don't know. I enjoyed that batting stance. I even tried a little bit to emulate Jeff Bagwell when I started playing, and I had kind of a low crouch when I first started, and then I realized that it didn't work for me. So
dude, it's hard. It's hard to hit like that.
Incredibly hard to generate power like that. So the fact that he could do it is insane.
Yeah, we when we were kids, we'd have home run derbies and we'd get in different stances. Everybody always tried Bagwell's. We could never hit like that. He claimed he could see the ball better because his eyes were closer to pitch level, but man, I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he hit like that.
I don't know either. You think his legs would get tired?
Look at them. They're also the size of tree trunks.
Yeah, they're huge. So Corey Richmond is in the chat. He's surprised. He says, really Bagwell over Mattingly and Hernandez? Simply wow. So that's the kind of reactions I was hoping to get on these lists. I love it. It's just a matter of opinion. Yeah. So, I mean, he has better offense than Mattingly or Hernandez, but they were a little more defensively minded. So, and we're going to see that that's a common theme. Offense matters in this list. Speaking of that, let's go to our number 8. So our number 8 first baseman of all time, Willie McCovey. My man, Willie McCovey, he's got a whole cove named after him, Willie McCovey. He spent a 22-year career with the Giants, Padres, and A's from 1959 to 1980. Playing in 2,588 games, he hit a career 270 average, 374 OBP, and a 515 slugging percentage. A career 145 weighted runs created plus. He hit for 67.4 WAR, appeared in 6 All-Star games, was the 1959 Rookie of the Year. 10 seasons later, he won the NL MVP in 1969 and his 20th all-time in home runs with 521. I got to say, I'm a little surprised that Willie McCovey is as low. I didn't think he was going to be up in the top 3, but I thought he was going to be like 5th or 6th. Is that the way you see it? I didn't see him in the bottom 3rd of this list until, I would have put him 5th or 6th. What do you think?
I can see that. There's definitely at least one guy still to come on the list that I would have certainly had below McCovey, and I'll air that grievance when we get to it. But McCovey, when I was younger, I kind of viewed McCovey as maybe being a little overrated in terms of his power based on where he played a lot of his home games early in his career with the short right field. However, I did a little bit more research into it, and as much as McCovey did pull the ball a fair amount, he did not pull the ball right down the line to the short right field, and so a lot of his home runs that I had originally viewed as maybe cheaper, I actually learned were not. He was earning those home runs. I guess there's a reason why eventually in San Francisco they named the cove after him. He did hit the ball a long ways,
Right.
and he probably doesn't get enough credit overall because he was very rarely the best player on his team,
Right.
because a good chunk of his career he played with Willie freaking Mays,
Yeah.
who is, depending on who you ask, the best player, or at minimum one of the 10 best players to ever play the game.
Right.
So I'm sure Willie McCovey gets dinged there just because he played alongside Willie Mays.
Yeah, and I always think that argument is funny. He wasn't even the best player on his team, but you got to look at who he's playing with, right? And you just said it. Willie McCovey played with Willie Mays. There really isn't very many people that were better, if nobody was better than Willie Mays. So yeah, he wasn't the best player on his team because he had one of the greatest of all time on his team. So no duh, right? But he's still a good first baseman nonetheless. But when I think of first baseman of all time, you are right. You kind of have to look statistically to find that Willie McCovey is up there. I don't think Willie McCovey when it comes to elite all time, but I've seen enough of his stats to know that he's there.
Right.
So, but he's not the first one. He's not really there when it comes to, when you say the word first baseman. McCovey doesn't come to my head. So, I know I said maybe 5'6", but with that, maybe 8 is a good place for him. So I'm really interested to see who you have a grievance with. So I want to move to number 7 and see if that's the guy that you have a grievance with. So our number 7 dude for first base is Hank Greenberg. This one I have a bit of an issue with. Hank, and why he's so high. So Hank Greenberg spent a 13-year career with the Tigers and the Pirates in 1930, and then took a break, and then played in 1933 to 1941, and then came back in 1945 and played until 1947. He missed 3 seasons due to military service. He played in just 1,394 games, but in those 1,394 games he played, he hit for a career .313 average, a .412 on base percentage, and a .605 slugging percentage, which is good for 6th all time. He has a career 154 weighted runs created plus, which is tied for 20th with Willie Mays and Frank Thomas. Okay. He hit for 61.1 WAR. He had 5 All-Star appearances and was the AL MVP in 1935 and 1940. I'm going to air a grievance here. I don't think Hank Greenberg should be this high. Do I think he has a right to be on the top 10? Yeah, I think he has a claim to be on the top 10, but not number 7, not above McCovey for sure. Not above, some of these other guys. He didn't play enough. He played less than 1,400 games. Yeah, his average is high, his slugging is high, but what happens if he plays another 1,000 games? Is it still up there? I don't know. Right. So this one is my first grievance with this list. This is where I have a problem with it. Do you see it that way? Is this the guy you have a grievance with? Is Hank Greenberg?
All right. You share a name with everyone's favorite small bird Pokemon. So you get some credit there, but I'm going to have to disagree with you on the original Hammer and Hank, which he was known as Hammer and Hank before Hank Aaron was. Hank Greenberg is, to me, a top 5 first baseman of all time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This wasn't even the grievance I was talking about earlier, but I do have a grievance here. I think he's too low. Hank Greenberg has the 6th highest slugging percentage of all time. And if you look at the time he missed, most of 1941 and then all of 42, 43, and 44, it was because he was fighting in World War II.
Right.
And if I recall correctly, he voluntarily enlisted He is Jewish, sometimes called the Hebrew Hammer, and he was essentially fighting for his people, which is a really cool thing, really noble thing for him to have done. And so when he missed the almost 4 seasons due to his military service, that was pretty much in his prime. So you could say that maybe his numbers would have dipped a little, but likely they would have been pretty similar to what we see because it was mostly during his prime that he missed. I believe uh, it was ages 30 through 33 or 31 through 34. And for power hitters, that's pretty much their prime. And Hank Greenberg was an absolute monster. A 600 slugging. I think there's only 7 guys in the history of baseball that have a 600 slugging, and he's one of them. Not that many first basemen, that many players, period. And I get the argument on not playing as much. You know, the 1,400 games is not nearly as many games as some of these other guys. But I have a hard time believing that if he would not have been in World War II, I have a hard time believing that his numbers would have dipped very much.
I can see that. I could respect that argument. I think it's it's a good argument. I really have a hard time putting people on greatest of all time lists that play significantly lower amount of game totals, because you don't know what could have happened in that 1,000 games. You know what I mean? You don't know. Like we saw, I guess this is kind of a little bit, I don't know if this is the correct example or not, but you look at like Chris Davis of the Orioles, right? He had 2 really good seasons. Everybody thought he was an elite first baseman, and then he fell off the face of the planet and became one of the worst hitters in MLB, right? So you just don't know. Now his numbers are very impressive. 605 slugging, only 5 major leaguers have a higher slugging percentage than him. Right. So it is very impressive. For me, that's where I have a hard time, is the, 1,400 games played, but seems like I'm in the minority as far as people that are paying attention right now. I got Corey Richmond in the chat, who thinks that he should be higher, along with you, Kevin. He thinks that, the Hebrew Hammer should be a little bit higher. So nonetheless, whether you think he should be higher or lower, it doesn't matter, because Baseball Life put him at number 7. So there is that. Let's move on to number 6. Our number 6 first baseman of all time is Miguel Cabrera. Miguel Cabrera has spent a 20-year career with the Marlins and Tigers from 2000 and starting in 2003. And he just announced a couple weeks ago that 2023 will be his last season. As of right now, he's played in 2,699 games, good for 33rd all time. He has a career 308 ERA, career 308 average, a 384 on base, and a 524 slugging, which is good for 60th all time. He has a career 140 weighted runs created plus, tied for 65th all time. He has a 68.6 WAR so far, and it can only go up. He's tied for 68th all time with Johnny Mize. He's appeared in 12 All-Star games, which I don't understand the legacy pick from last year. It really should be 11. I don't understand I don't understand the legacy pick. I didn't like that. Anyway, he was the AL MVP in 2012 and 2013. He should only have one because Mike Trout should have the other. He was the 2012 Triple Crown winner. He has won the Silver Slugger 7 times, is 27th all-time in homers with 507, 14th all-time in, should be RBIs. I put RBs, so apparently it's running backs. 14th all-time in RBIs with 1,847, and 25th all-time in hits, 3,088. I think you can argue he's probably one of the best Venezuelan players ever to come out of that country. Miguel Cabrera, 6th all-time. This one, I think I would have to agree with Corey in the chat there. I think this is a little bit recency bias. I think everybody is seeing this career kind of come to a close, and everybody sees how great Miguel Cabrera is. I think he's a little higher than I would put Miggy, but nonetheless, he is number 6. What do you think there, Kevin?
Yeah, Miguel Cabrera, he's a little bit tough for me because you do have the recency bias that we can all fall into. But another aspect of recency bias could could be that he's been terrible the
Yeah,
last couple seasons.
that is true.
And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, like no doubt. But I wonder if 20 years from now, we would look at Miguel Cabrera in a more favorable light if he would have retired after, say, 2018 or 2019, rather than hanging on for these last few years where, I mean, he's even admitted, he said, I'm not good and I don't feel good. That's what he said last year. And that it's difficult to see and to watch with a guy who's so great. But if you look at especially his rate stats, they're just plummeting.
Yeah.
He was a guy who 2 seasons ago, his career OPS was about 930. It's now under 900, or it's going to be under 900 after this next season.
Right.
Like, it's plummeting. And I'm wondering what his legacy would look like if, instead of finishing his career in 2023, if maybe he would have finished it 4 years earlier. He's a top 10 first baseman of all time. To me, I don't know that I would have gone as high as 6, but I'm also wondering if the end is negatively affecting it as well.
That could also be true. And that does pose a question for me. Do some of these long, big contracts, because he signed a long, big contract. We knew that this was coming with the Tigers. So would that harm, do these big contracts that people are signing? And we're seeing like Trey Turner signing an 11-year deal. We're seeing these guys sign big contracts, and I'm sure we're going to see Aaron Judge sign a big 10-year contract. Does that affect the legacy going on? Because we know the numbers are going to depreciate.
I think it will. I don't know that I agree with this, but I heard somebody say that by the time Trey Turner's contract is over, he will just be end of career Walt Weiss, and where he's a good contact hitter but doesn't have any more power and can't run anymore because he's 40 years old. And I don't know that I want to go to quite that extent, but yeah, I do think that these long contracts are going to affect guys' legacies, because instead of being able to age out gracefully and maybe even retire a little bit earlier or take a diminished role on a team, like a lot of Hall of Famers did at the very end, right. You're going to have these guys that are playing every day because they're getting paid $30 million a year. Yeah. And expectations are a little bit different when you make that kind of money.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of the pitfall that's a big pitfall that you have with these contracts. We saw it with the Angels and Albert Pujols, right? They were paying him a ton to just be bad. He was not great at the end there of the Angels tenure. We saw Chris Davis. Chris Davis got paid a huge contract and then he was bad. We're seeing it over and over and over again. And I think it's diminishing the legacies. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Miguel Cabrera would have been higher if he retired. He would have been seen maybe in a little more favorable light if he retired 4 years ago. But, now we've just watched the last 3-4 years. He just has not been the Miguel Cabrera that we know he used to be. And we know he can't be that guy because, he's older and he can't produce that, but he's getting paid like he should. Right. And I don't know. I don't think it's right. I don't like these big, long, huge, long deal contracts. I think they're a bad idea for the team. I think they're a bad idea for the player. That's just my opinion. I'm sure there's somebody else who's going to say, whatever, shut up. Right. So, who knows? We'll see. But yeah, nonetheless, Miguel Cabrera does make our top 10. He is number 6 overall. Let's move into our top 5, moving into the 5th. We're moving into our 5th ranked first baseman of all time. And that 5th ranked first baseman is Eddie Murray. Eddie Murray spent a 21-year career with the Orioles, Dodgers, Mets, the Indians at the time, and the Angels. That I did not know. That was a surprise for me. I had no idea. From 1977 to 1997, he played 3,026 games, which is good for 8th all time. He had a career 287 average with a 359 OBP and a 476 slugging, good for a 127 weighted runs created plus. For me, If you're looking for greatest of all time, that weighted runs created plus is a little low. He played, he hit for a 72 WAR, which is good for 55th all time. He has 8 All-Star appearances, was Rookie of the Year in 1977, won the Gold Glove 3 times, the Silver Slugger 3 times, is 28th all time in homers at 504. Is 11th all time in RBIs with 1,917 and 14th all time in hits, 3,255. Eddie Murray at number 5. Kevin, what do you think about this distinction for Eddie Murray?
It's time to air my grievance.
Oh, yes, I found it. All right.
All right, I'll start it off with asking you a trivia question.
Okay.
Do you know what Eddie Murray's career high in home runs is?
Ooh, let's take a guess. 27.
Ooh, no, not quite that bad. It's 33.
Oh, I was okay.
33 is his career high in home runs, matches his Orioles jersey there. And I'm sorry, Eddie Murray was a very good player for a long time. He is nowhere close to the 5th best first baseman to ever play this beautiful game. Eddie Murray is probably, to give him some credit, probably the 3rd best switch hitter of all time. I think it's Mickey Mantle, Chipper Jones, and then probably Eddie Murray. I mean, you can make an argument for Carlos Beltran. Some people would try to make an argument for Pete Rose. They're wrong, but they would try to make that argument. Much like Pete Rose, Eddie Murray was a compiler. And again, he was a very good player for a very long time. But my man had a 127 career WRC plus. His slugging percentage is 130 points lower than Hank Greenberg's. 130 points lower. This dude does not belong, I don't think, even in the top 10. I think I might have even voted him number 10. And the only reason I did is because he played for 72 years. So he got up to 3,000 hits and 500 home runs.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Eddie Murray here, I think these stats he's got is a bit of a compiler. I mean, I've already said it, 127 weighted runs created plus. When you're talking greatest of all time, that's pretty low. That means that he's better than he's 27% better than the average major leaguer all time. So that's just, I don't know. That's a little low to me. I would agree with you. The chat agrees with you as well. We're seeing, wow, Murray at 5. That's just crazy talk. So I think we all have the same grievance as you. I think I'm way too excited to have finally found the grievance.
Well, and here's another thing about Eddie Murray is he played on a team with Cal Ripken Jr., right? Which, right. Obviously Cal is going to go down as a better player than Eddie Murray. Mm-hmm. But Cal played shortstop and overall most years was a better hitter than the first baseman, Eddie Murray. And man, I can't get behind viewing Eddie Murray in this kind of light. He's a good player for a long time. If I were to just completely throw out any previous list I've made and start over and make a first base list, I don't know that he's in the top 15 for me.
Oh, wow. That's bold. Okay.
And if he is, again, it's only because he held on and played so long so that he could get to 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. And I don't want this to sound so disrespectful to Eddie Murray because he's a great player. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'm not denying any of that. He never won an MVP. He just didn't because he wasn't good enough. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't the best hitter on his team most years. And that was without playing with Willie Mays like Willie McCovey did. It's without playing with Babe Ruth like Lou Gehrig did. Cal Ripken Jr., very good offensive player, excellent for his position. But you should not view Eddie Murray this high. I can't get over the fact that Eddie Murray is below everyone else that we've had on this list so far. Everyone in the top 10 should be above Eddie Murray, all of them.
And I think the reason why I think this has to do with the number of times that he was on a ballot, because when you look at it, I just looked. the most votes he got on a ballot was 8th. He got the most, like 8th all time, right around there, right? But he was on more lists than some of these other guys. And so because he was on because he appeared on more lists, he was higher. So I agree with you. I don't think Eddie Murray is number 5, but there were a lot of people that saw him as a top 10 first baseman. So because a lot of people saw him as that, it ranked him higher. So this may be a math thing. This may not necessarily be a reflection on what baseball life sees in Eddie Murray, because it seems like the majority see him kind of as the lower third in the top 10. But nonetheless, he's number 5. I think this is the biggest mistake in this list. Would you agree?
I agree with that. I do want to say one thing to Eddie Murray's credit. There is a picture, you can probably find it on the internet, of him and Cal Ripken Jr. celebrating after they won the World Series in, what was it, 1982, maybe? Anyway, in the picture, they're covered in champagne and sweat and all this stuff. And next to each other, they look like Samuel L. Jackson and Matthew McConaughey. And it's really funny looking, because it was when Cal had hair, and it was back in the it looked like 90s Samuel L. Jackson with the fro, and it's really funny looking. So if you find that picture, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm gonna have to look up that picture. We might have to post that in Baseball Life. That'll be funny. Let's move into our number 4 first baseman of all time. After our big grievance here, we're starting to get into the upper echelon here. Number 4 all time, according to Baseball Life, the big hurt, Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas spent a 19-year career with the White Sox, the A's, and the Blue Jays from 1990 to 2008. He played in 2,322 games played, albeit some of that is DH. So I was kind of shocked that, they kind of put him in first base, but nonetheless, he hit for a career 301 average, 419 OBP, which is good for 20th all time, not just first baseman, all time. And he's tied for 22nd all time in slugging at 555. He's tied for 20th with Willie Mays and Hank Greenberg in weighted runs created plus at 154. He has a 72.1 WAR, 54th all time. He appeared in 5 All-Star games, was the 1993 and 94 AL MVP, won the Silver Slugger 4 times, is 21st all-time in homers with 521, and 26th all-time in RBIs at 1,704. Frank Thomas, number 4. Kevin, what's your reaction to our number 4 first baseman of all time?
I personally love it. And part of the reason why I say that is because I've got no problem with considering Frank Thomas a first baseman, even though he technically had more games started as a DH than a first baseman. And the reason I don't have a problem with it is because while he did become a designated hitter, he was not the kind of guy that if you put him at first base, he was just some awful, awful, awful butcher at first base. He was not David Ortiz at first base.
Okay.
Frank Thomas was not a Gold Glove winner. I'm not comparing him to Keith Hernandez, Don Mattingly, Mark Teixeira, Vic Power, all those guys. I'm not doing that. But he was not some butcher over there. In fact, when he was young, he was actually a pretty good glove at first base. So him becoming a DH, to me, doesn't necessarily disqualify him from the first base list, because he was still capable of playing there. He, especially the later parts of his White Sox career, Paul Konerko had come over and was a younger guy, and Paul Konerko played first base, and there were some other players mixed in that did the same. So I don't have a problem with it, especially when you look at purely the offensive stats. Frank Thomas was an absolute monster. And he was a monster that, despite the way he looked, unless he did some hidden HGH, he was clean. He voluntarily gave tests and interviews for the Mitchell Report and a few other steroid investigations. Like, most players said they weren't going to be a part of it. Even if they were clean, they didn't want to be a part of it because they didn't want to expose other players. Frank Thomas is like, I got no problem. Come test me. I'll talk about whatever you want. I'm clean.
You can tell he's just a big man.
Right. Even when he was like 20 years old in the minor league or at Auburn, you can look at it and, like, he was enormous. He obviously gained a little bit of weight as he got older, as everyone does, but he was
Yeah.
already enormous. I mean, when he got to Auburn, he was going to play football too. He was a defensive tackle. I mean, he's huge.
Yeah.
This was not artificial size. So
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with viewing him as clean. I think he was. And when you just look at the stats, I mean, they're unbelievable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And he was one of my favorite hitters to watch as I was growing up. Frank Thomas was. By the way, you mentioned Paul Konerko. Paul Konerko also got some mentions in the first baseman list. He was 25th. He ranked 25th in this exercise we have here. But Frank Thomas at number 4. Yeah, his stats are just bananas. I mean, a lot of these offensive stats here, he's in the top 20. And it's just his offensive prowess is just not just his power, but his on base. 419 on base. He's good for 20th all time. You know, you just don't see that in power hitting first basemen. They strike out. They don't get on base, right? So I don't know. I think not only with the power, but just the fact that he could get on base was something to be amazed at in of itself.
Well, and he played a lot of his career with nagging injuries too, and he was still this productive.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't miss a ton of time. Other than I know in 2005, actually, when the White Sox won the World Series his last year there, you know, he missed a lot of time then. But most of the time, he didn't miss time while he was hurt. He just, you know, he played through injuries, and he was still this good. And that's amazing to me. I know I've been, you know, kind of drooling over Frank Thomas here, but that's because he's really good.
He is really good. So if he's that good and only made number 4, who's in the top 3? Well, we're going to show you the top 3 right now. At number 3, Jimmy Fox. Jimmy Fox played a 20-year career with the Philadelphia A's, the Red Sox, the Cubs, and then the Philadelphia Phillies from 1925 to 1942. And then he came back and played for the Phillies in 1944 and 1945. He played in 2,317 games, a career 325 hitting average, a 428 on base, good for 10th all-time, and 4th all-time in slugging at 609. He's tied for 12th all-time with Stan the Man at 158 weighted runs created plus. He is 20th all-time with a 101.8 career WAR. He has 9 all-star appearances. He won the MVP in 1932, 33, and 38. He won the Triple Crown in 1933. Is 19th all-time in homers at 534 and 10th all-time in RBIs at 1,922. Jimmy Fox, deservedly in the top 3 for me. What do you think?
I agree. I think when I was making my own list, I kept flip-flopping him between 2 and 3, and
I could definitely see him at number 2.
And he was really, really good. He's also kind of a sad story too. When you look at some of the things people remember about Jimmy Fox, one of the things that a lot of people might bring up is that he drank a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy Fox actually supposedly began drinking because his first wife was very physically abusive towards him, and he didn't respond in kind and instead hit the bottle. And then he actually quit after their marriage no longer existed, and then picked up the bottle again after facing some injuries as he got a little bit older. And some of his teammates even said that he would play games very drunk, and he was still this good. You know, it's kind of hard to fathom how anybody could hit a baseball while intoxicated, but apparently Jimmy Fox did it, and did it regularly. And you know, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. 4th all time in slugging. You know, the 158 WRC plus is kind of crazy, especially when you consider he's a first baseman, and WRC plus and WAR. Those numbers are a little bit affected by playing first base.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize, though, he caught on and off during his career too.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so you know, he had a little bit of catcher's knees, there and, drank too much, and he was still this good. Jimmy Fox was viewed at the time he was playing as just as good of a hitter as Babe Ruth.
Oh, wow. That's a good comp. I'll take that. Well, and Babe Ruth drank quite a bit too, if I remember correctly. So,
Yes, he did.
yeah. So, I feel like a lot of people in that time drank quite a bit, but it's just some people drank more than others. I mean, you have to be really good if you can do that intoxicated. So yeah, that was really great insight. I love that. I love that story. That was cool. Corey Richmond agrees. Great insight. Great insight. Nice job, Kevin.
Thank you. Do you know how Jimmy Fox died?
How did Jimmy Fox die?
Choking on food.
No.
Yep. You know what's even weirder?
What?
His second wife also died choking on food.
What? That is what a way to go. That would be terrible. Wow. That's awful. Well, he is definitely a sad story, but he is a happy memory in our thoughts. Jimmy Fox, number 3 all time, according to Baseball Life, at the first base position. So who is better than Jimmy Fox? At number 2, the machine, Albert Pujols. Albert Pujols spent a 22-year career with the Cardinals, Angels, and Dodgers from 2001 to 2022. He played in 3,080 games, good for 5th all time. He had a career 296 average, 374 OBP, and a 544 slugging percentage, good for 32nd all time. He has a 141 weighted runs created plus in his career, good for 58th all time. He has an 88.8 WAR, good for 27th all time. He appeared in 11 All-Star games, was a 2001 Rookie of the Year, won the NL MVP in 2005, 2008, and 2009. In 2006 and 2010, he won the Gold Glove, won the Silver Slugger 6 times, is 4th all-time in home runs with 703, 2nd all-time in RBIs with 2,218, and 10th all-time in hits, 3,384, and arguably one of the greatest right-handed hitters in our generation. The machine, Albert Pujols, at number 2 in the greatest first baseman of all time. Kevin, what do you have to say about Albert Pujols?
If you don't love Albert Pujols, you're wrong, or a Cubs fan. That's what I have to say about Albert Pujols. I mean, the man was incredible. And if I could give him the plantar fascias out of my feet and just let him have them while he was an Angel, who knows what these numbers would look like, because he could not move the second half of his career because his feet were just absolutely broken down. He could not, at times, could not plant on his front foot when he was swinging. A lot of times he had to DH rather than play first base because he could not move because the plantar fascias in his feet were just done. And I wonder, he hit 703 home runs as it is. If he had healthy feet, is he the all-time home run champion? I think he probably would have been. He played, 10 seasons as an Angel? And then he had obviously this great farewell season with the Cardinals. If you just add a couple of home runs a year, due to healthy feet, who knows? Maybe he's the all-time home run king. And I think that's something to think about when you're thinking about how good somebody was. It's like, would maybe one little thing drastically change their legacy? And I think maybe just healthy feet might have given Albert Pujols what he needed to be maybe number 1 on this list and maybe number 1 on the all-time home run list.
As an Angel fan, I do have to say, when he came to the Angels first couple of years, he was producing. He was hitting 25, 30 homers, right?
He was 41 year.
Yeah. It wasn't in his second.
I think so.
It was in his second season for the Angels. He hit 40 homers. And so he was still producing. But yeah, the feet, it was just this plantar fasciitis. And you could tell he was hurting. I mean, the man couldn't run. People made fun of him because he was so slow. He was so slow because his feet hurt. You try running with plantar fasciitis that, are just done. That hurts, So, I was, as an Angel fan, I was glad to have Albert Pujols on the team. And it was great to see him. He's one of the, in my mind, one of the greatest, if not the greatest right-handed hitter in our generation. One of the greatest hitters of all time. And I mean, it just, I don't think it's a very far stretch to say if he did not get plantar fasciitis, or if maybe he had a few more years of having healthy feet, I could very well see him as the home run king. Right. And it just, speaks to how good he is, knowing that he was that good. And I think he had very little steroid suspicion, but he didn't have, he had way less steroid suspicion than most other people that were hitting as well as he did. And if he had healthy feet, his career batting average still would be over 300. The reason why he has a career 296 average is because his last couple of years with the Angels were just terrible. They were just that bad. If it weren't for that, we would be seeing a career average over 300. So, again, this is another one of if all of the challenges that he faced and he was that good still, who knows how good he would have been if he had healthy feet, so I agree. So anything else you have to say on Albert Pujols before we move to number one?
Yeah, just real quick, just thinking about his prime, man. I remember, because everybody did this when they were kids. I'd be homesick watching Sports Center for the fourth time in a row, and there would be highlights, and I remember two different times distinctly there being web gem plays that a defender made where it was off of a ball that Pujols hit, and I remember one time Stuart Scott and another time Brian Kenny both said, wow, they got Pujols out. That's a big deal. And we're talking about baseball. Like, you fail 70% of the time, but he was so feared and so good that just to get him out seemed like an accomplishment.
Right.
And man, in 2009, I was in New York. It might've been the first year of Citi Field. It was one of the first years of Citi Field. And at the end of batting practice, Pujols jumped back in the line and asked the BP pitcher to throw him 3 more pitches. I saw him hold up 3 fingers. And I'm in the left field bleachers, and I'm like, okay, I might get me a ball, right? And I did not get a ball because Albert took 3 pitches and hit all 3 of them off the luxury box windows on the 3rd deck. 3 in a row, bang, glass, bang, glass, bang, glass. It didn't break the glass, but I have not seen somebody do that before. Just say 3 more pitches and hit each one on 450 feet into the luxury boxes with just no sweat whatsoever.
It's just, the man is a freak. I mean, he was just a freak of nature. I'm glad to be able to have seen a player like that in my lifetime. So Albert Pujols, rightfully, in my opinion, having his farewell season with the Cardinals. I think he just, if it wasn't for, if it happened any other way, it just wouldn't have felt right. I think him having that farewell season in St. Louis was really good for him. So Albert Pujols was number 2. Who's number 1? Well, most of you have probably taken a guess at who number 1 is, because he hasn't been mentioned yet, and there's no way that he's not in the top 10. And if he's not in the top 10, this list has got to be egregiously wrong, right? Well, hopefully that this list is not egregiously wrong, because our number 1 first baseman of all time, according to Baseball Life, is Lou Gehrig. Lou Gehrig spent a 17-year career with the Yankees from 1923 to 1939. He played in 2,164 games and hit for a career 340 average, good for 19th all time, a 447 OBP, which is good for 5th all time, and a 632 slugging percentage, good for 3rd all time. He has a career 173 weighted runs created plus, good for 3rd all time. He has 116.3 WAR, good for 12th all time. He appeared in 17 All-Star games, won the MVP in 1927 and 1936, won the Triple Crown in 1934. He's tied for 29th all-time in home runs with 493 and 7th all-time in RBIs with 1,995. And I think this is the biggest case of what could have been if he didn't get sick, if he didn't get what's known now as ALS, what could have been, right? Nonetheless, according to Baseball Life, Lou Gehrig is the greatest first baseman of all time. I don't have any qualms with Lou Gehrig being number one. What do you think?
I mean, I agree. I mean, even just based off what he did, not even considering the what if, I think it's fine having him at number one. And when you consider that, his last couple years in baseball, before his final season, he would complain of fatigue and just feeling not right. And then his final year, obviously, it really ratcheted up, and he knew something was wrong. And he ended his Iron Man streak. That's where he got the name Iron Horse, was that he played so much. And then he never played again. That's what a lot of people don't realize, is that he did not play after he took himself out of the lineup that day. He was there, he was present, but he was unable to play. As a matter of fact, when he was going to the doctor, they traveled by train a lot back then. He was traveling with somebody from, I think it was the New York Times in its early existence, but they were, the writer was commenting on how everybody was wishing him well everywhere he saw it. He said, yeah, I'm sick, but I'm dying too. So he knew, Lou Gehrig knew that his body was so not right, that not only was his career going to end, but that his body was shutting down too. Which is, it's so sad to think about, because, at age 34, his body started to feel weird. And by age 36, he was done. You tack on a few more really good years and maybe a few more, twilight years onto that, and we're talking about a guy who might have hit 600 home runs and would have had 3,000 hits and, maybe 2,500 RBIs. And I mean, we're talking about him going from the best first baseman of all time to maybe top 5 player of all time.
Right.
And he's not that far from the discussion as is, if we're being honest.
Oh, I agree. I wholeheartily agree. He's got to be in the top, 10, 15, 20 players of all time. I have zero qualms. In fact, I believe I had Lou Gehrig at number one as well, which is really something, because I really wanted to put Pujols at number one, but I could not put Pujols at number one because Lou Gehrig was just that good. I mean, to be that durable and that consistent for a long time and be that good, it's just otherworldly. This is a player that I wish I would have been able to see play, Lou Gehrig. So it's, I don't know. This man, I think, deserves a lot of credit when it comes to being a baseball player. And I don't think I've ever heard a crossword about Lou Gehrig ever. In baseball history, baseball fandom, I don't think I've ever heard a crossword about Lou Gehrig. And that's tough to say when you talk about baseball fans. Baseball fans either like you or they don't. And you usually have somebody that likes you or doesn't. And I believe it was Lou Gehrig that said, even when he was going through slumps, Yankee fans never booed him. He never got booed in Yankee Stadium. He was always clapped for, always cheered for. And that's hard to do in a New York market. Even back then, it was hard to do. So the fact
To
that,
be fair, what kind of slumps did he really go through until the end?
That's also true. That's also true. So, I think very rightfully Lou Gehrig deserved to be number one on our list of top 10. So I can I go over it again? I don't want to mess up the computer. So no, I think we're good with not going over it. Let's really quickly. So that's our top 10 of all time. Let's see where they stack up in terms of, it's not total bases without a spreadsheet. So I'll quickly go to a spreadsheet. I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen so that I can do this. And then we will end the show. Where is it? I got to get it. I don't know where it's at. We will be moving to I can't find it all of a sudden. I don't know what happened. We'll be moving to to second baseman next. That whole window. Oh, there it is. We will be moving to second baseman next in our greatest of all time series. And I got to get this up. There it is. Okay, here we go. So let's really quickly just pull up the spreadsheet and then we will end the show. Much to Felipe's liking here. Here is our spreadsheet. First baseman only. Greatest of all time first baseman statistics. It is from 1923 to present time with a minimum 6,000 plate appearances. Obviously, red is good and blue is not. You come down here and here we are. So in terms of hits, here you see Albert Pujols at number 1, then Eddie Murray. There's our guy, Eddie Murray, the compiler, at 4th on this list with 3,255 hits. You see Miguel Cabrera, Lou Gehrig is down here, Jimmy Fox, Frank Thomas, all the way down here. Here's Jeff Bagwell, and then you have McCovey, and then you keep going down, Killebrew, and then there was somebody down here in the blue, if I remember correctly. Yep, there's Hank Greenberg, and that's essentially because he's, he only played 1,394 games. So there's that. Is there a specific stat now that you're seeing this spreadsheet there? Is there a specific stat you want to focus on here in order?
Just to reiterate more of my grievance from earlier, we can take a peek at Eddie Murray's slugging percentage, which is 476, which is, we'll just say not a very high number when you're considering the power position that first base is. That's a fine number for most players, but when you're talking about the top 10 of first basemen ever, that's the number is just not. It doesn't compare to these other guys.
So let's take a look at Eddie Murray here. So we see some red here in terms of hits and homers and RBIs, some more of the counting stats, and that's to be expected when you play 3,000 games and have 12,000 plate appearances. You're bound to have that stuff. But you look at the rate stats here, there's a lot of just basic white. You have the cream white here. You have the average, and the OBP and the slugging are pretty white here. You've got the walk percentage is kind of in the blue, actually. And then you've got the strikeout percentage in the red. So he didn't strike out, he only struck out 11% of the time. The WOBA, and then the weighted runs created plus, it's not blue, but it's not red. It's like right in the middle there. And then our WAR there. So you see the WAR again, that's more if you've played for a while, you kind of start to see a higher WAR. So you see that tinge of red, but when you play 3,000 games, you would like to see it look something like, Lou Gehrig's or something like that, right? When you play 22 seasons and you play 3,000 games, that's what you want to see. And you don't, it's just barely any sort of tinge of red there. So let's see. Can I do this? Let's see. Can I do this on the spot? No, I cannot. Great. Let's see who's higher in terms of Eddie Murray. When it comes to, I gotta freeze this column. When it comes to, of course, there's a problem. Stupid Google Sheets. Let's see. Who's higher when it comes to Eddie Murray? Rod Carew. Rod Carew is higher in WAR. We've got, let's see, who else? Tony Perez. Is not higher. I'm sorry. That's lower. Let's see.
Frank Thomas, who played half his career as a DH.
Frank Thomas. Let's see. Here's one. Oh, Jeff Bagwell. Jeff Bagwell is there. Let's see. Anybody else going down? I don't see any more really that are higher. What about comparable here? Here's a comparable one. Oh, is that Eddie Murray? No, that's Miggy.
But Miggy's probably the worst defender of everyone we've talked about today too. His defensive numbers bring his WAR way down.
That's also true. Rafael Palmeiro, who didn't even sniff this list, is up here at 70, and he played a little under 3,000 games. So, not it's a comparable career, I guess. And well, I guess you could say Eddie Murray did it, as far as we know, he did it clean.
Well, look at the rate stats between Eddie Murray and Tony Perez. They're really similar. and nobody in their right mind would have voted for Tony Perez.
Yeah. Yeah, the rate stats are you're right. The rate stats are very similar. You have pretty similar averages.
He's got a little bit better OVP.
A little bit better OVP, about 10 points higher when it comes to slugging, but for sure, definitely very comparable to Tony Perez, and Tony Perez didn't even sniff this list either. Let's see. Just what is that? 9 wins above Ernie Banks, and Ernie Banks didn't make this list. Let's see who else. 72.1. Oh, that's Thomas. Frank Thomas. Let's see. 62.3. Joe Torre. Joe Torre played in 2,200 games, and he has a 62 WAR. That's 10 wins, but Eddie Murray's got a whole 1,000 games on Joe Torre. So I don't know. I agree. Eddie Murray is way too, let's see. Is that 60? Is that still Joe Torre? Yeah. What's Paul Konerko? Paul Konerko is at 24? No, that's way too low. Wow. Anyway, let's see. Where's Jim Tomei? Jim Tomei just missed this list. 69.1. And we have Eddie Murray at number 5. So yeah, I think Eddie Murray is probably the biggest mistake on this list. So yeah, lots of colors, lots of stuff, lots of good discussion though. Anything you want to say, any parting words before we sign off here?
Nothing really, just that I have enjoyed going through these lists. I'm gonna enjoy looking at the other positions. Hopefully there won't be as big of a grievance with any of the other positions as there was with Eddie Murray at 5 for first base. But if there is, I will make sure that the grievance is aired.
I will hold you to that. So thank you to everybody that was in the chat and watching live. Thank you to all of you who are going to listen to us on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on any of those. So if you haven't watched us on YouTube yet, this is probably one to watch on YouTube because there's a lot of multimedia different presentations that we have on this one. So thank you all for listening. Thank you to the Baseball Life Facebook group for putting this together. This is a really fun exercise, and I love debating stuff like this. For my friend there, Kevin, I am Austin Spiro. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Total Bases podcast, and we will see you next week for the greatest second baseman of all time. And until next time, have a good one, everybody.